The Story of Garston. A coat of arms adopted for Gaston, connected with the Blackburn family. Gaston today is a suburb of the great city of Liverpool, 5 miles upstream of the famous Pier Head. The name Gaston could come from Great Stone, since it's said that in the early village days, before the docks were built, there was off the riverbank a great stone outcrop resembling the back of a whale, doubtless a useful landmark for mariners on the river. Great Stone, Town, Gaston. Perhaps more likely the name goes back to several ancient versions, giving a picture of a delightful country village scene with meadows and fields, Grass Town or Gorse Town, hillocks of gorse, place of grazing, cows and sheep and all that. You take your pick. This is the story of the medieval village which became a town and port on the great River Mersey. Perhaps if Gaston had been further from a big city on a river, or had been more independent on the coast somewhere and not overshadowed by the port of Liverpool itself, its importance would have been more recognised. The village, at the turn of the 20th century, became a part of the expanding city of Liverpool, and by then had developed a triple dock system. Many great factories had sprung up, attracted by the developing railway and port. With all this came the population and the facilities which a community needs: churches, schools, swimming baths, clubs, shops, trams, buses, and passenger trains, hospital, doctors, and dentists, and council services. Gaston is now moving into the 21st century, after many changes over the past centuries of the second millennium. What are those changes, and what are the changing lives of the generations who've gone before? Not much of the great and remarkable history is visible today, but as we go on a journey through the Gaston of today, in the year 2002, we shall discover many reminders of the past. And as Gaston begins to be regenerated after years of deterioration, can pride in the past, we ask, be a spur to continuing effort to renew and move on as generation succeeds generation? The economic collapse of Liverpool, especially of the docks after the war, together with more recent housing and environmental deterioration and population change, has had its effect on Gaston. Many of the industries have closed, the population has changed, some people have moved away, and new people have arrived. The docks and tannery have survived in a limited way, but most of all, some of the community spirit of the people which has been passed on from generation to generation lives on. But why should there ever have been people living and working at this particular spot on the Mersey River bank centuries ago? Why? Because of a river tributary to the Mersey, a strong brook flowing from the hills of Woolton. This and all the land around was an ideal place to settle. Here was land for farming, fresh brook water for drinking and irrigation, freshwater fishing and sea fishing in the big river, stone to build with, clay for bricks, and timber from the forests of Toxteth and Speke for fuel and homes, tools and furniture. The story begins with Adam, Gaston's own Adam. Adam de Gerston, in the 12th century, owned a good part of the Garston brook and its surrounding land down to the Mersey. The brook could be dammed up to power water mills, of which there may have been as many as 5. Adam had a mill for tanning and fulling. His mill was said to be the earliest manufacturing industry in Lancashire. Fulling was a process for producing a heavy felted cloth from sheep's wool, and leather was of course produced as a byproduct of meat and milk production from cows. There was also flour milling for bread. This was an agricultural and farming area, a good place to live. Adam, however, eventually decided to give all his estate to the monks of Stanlawe across the river. All the produce of farm and dam would doubtless supply the needs of the monastery and its visitors. However, the monks eventually became unable to contend with damp and boggy land where they were, and moved the abbey to Whalley in Lancashire, where it remains to this day, still partly in use. But the monks retained ownership and control of Gaston with its essential supplies. Their grange, or granary, became Gaston Hall, as in these pictures. Before the big development of railway, docks and industries much later on, the Gaston village, with its powerful brook and mill dams, must have been a delightful place to live and work. Very hard work, no doubt. We have a picturesque description of the village from the writing of a Mr. Saunders Jones, quoted in The History of Garston and its Church, compiled by the Reverend J. M. Swift, Vicar of Garston in 1937. The church stood on a bluff at the head of a romantic glen, down which meandered a stream which emptied itself into the clear waters of the Mersey. Within sight of the sacred building stood the corn mill of Adam de Gerston, with its dam and large sheet of water, while Garston Hall and its outbuildings were used as granaries for the monks of Stanlawe Abbey. Fortunate were the harvesters of land and sea, with the grassy slopes of Allerton to look upon, and the cultivated fields of Gaston. Fortunate were the owners of fishing rights, for they were of great value. So plentiful were supplies of fish that after human needs were satisfied, the pigs were fed with salmon and the fields fertilized with herring. In 1793, 44 different kinds of fish were quoted as being available in the river. This painting of the inland part of the village around 1850 shows the Grange, the bridge with the brook flowing from a dam beyond the cottage, the Old Cross, Wilton Road, Speke Road as it became, St Mary's Road cut through here, the dam and brook leading down to the mill, the thatched cottage there until the early 1920s. In 1790 came the first big industry of the modern era, with the creation of the salt works by the Blackburn brothers, who removed from the salt house dock at Liverpool Pier Head. Garston salt was purified from rock salt brought over the river from the Northwich area. Garston salt was of a very good quality and was used for agricultural and chemical purposes as well as for domestic use. The really dramatic changes came with the building of the first wet dock by the St Helens Canal and Railway Company for the export of coal to Northern Ireland, and for the steamships which began to appear in great numbers in the Mersey. The silting up of the Mersey led to the need for docks more accessible than docks further upstream at Widnes and Runcorn. Following on from the building of the first dock in around 1850, the North Dock was built only about 16 years later, because the trade was expanding so rapidly, and of course many other imports and exports began to flow through Garston. The larger Stourbridge Dock was built in 1909, completely replacing and submerging the salt docks and works, of which no trace remains. And the open farmlands of village Garston had become a magnet for more railway lines and storage and new industries. The population of Garston by now had increased to being in the region of 17,000 people, increased, that is, from the few hundreds of the old village days. By the turn of the century, Garston was established with its diverse and impressive characteristics, a working town and a thriving community, and a village centre becoming more recognisable to the present generation. What is left of past characteristics today? Not a lot which is really visible, but with imagination and a wealth of photographs, we now take a journey around present-day Gaston to see and hear of some of the fascinating facts and stories which are a part of the story of this remarkable place and its remarkable people. A few famous people, yes, but the unknown and unnamed ordinary inhabitants who by the hundred worked in the factories, raised their families, laughed and played, struggled and achieved, are the real heroes, those who forged the community of Gaston generation by generation. We begin our present-day journey at the heart of Gaston, at the bottom of the village, as it's still called. St Mary's Road is the village. Here Garstonians in their hundreds met and shopped and talked and gossiped, sharing their joys and sorrows, keeping in touch with each other's problems and with the problems of work and of wars and of politics. Nearly everyone knew everyone. All the shops you ever needed, and people and trams and horses and carts, all the bustle and noise of busy and often struggling people living out their daily lives. We're at the crossroads, the traffic lights corner, looking uphill towards Liverpool. The pub on the right, the Mona Castle, its name reminding us of the Crown Copper Works on land off Window Lane. The works obtained its copper ore from the Paris Mona Mining Company in Anglesey. Signs of change beginning to show. The Mona has gone, the trams have long gone, the bypass has been built, and that symbol of Garston's maritime history, the leading light, is in place. But more changes are on the way. The shops and other facilities, of course, continuing behind us into Speke Road, leading out to Speke, and to the left leading to Horrocks Avenue, one of the newer roads historically. Church Road leads to beyond the bridge, with its large population, its pubs, churches, community centres, clubs, shops and docks and industries, and all the rest of the features which make up a community of this kind. We come back to under the bridge later on our journey. Church Road and the rest of the before the bridge community, the road becoming Woolton Road, and probably following along where one of our tributaries used to flow before joining the main stream which came from Woolton and Allerton Hills. The shops disappeared long ago, to be replaced by the housing department hut, and soon by new houses. The semi-derelict Ring o' Bells pub, later the well-known Ingram shoe shop. Along Woolton Road and near the station, the cenotaph, commemorating those who died in the 2 world wars. Turning to look towards Speke, we remember that this was the direction of the Turnpike Road out to Speke Hall and the Warrington area and all the places in that direction. And we're approaching the old boundary of Gaston, with the boundary stone still visible in the private garden of the house opposite the fire station. The boundary stone bears the inscription Garston Urban District Council and Childwall District Highways Board. The tenements of Speke Road, which in their early days were seen as very good quality accommodation, later to deteriorate. The tenements demolished, and now a very pleasing housing estate. To the back of the former tenements, Vineyard Street. Here was a very famous vineyard and fruit firm supplying high-quality grapes to Queen Victoria, Pope Pius, and other important European dignitaries. Some of the surviving and new shops today. Woolton Carpets, formerly Lennon's store, and before that Wilson Hall, where George Harrison of Beatles fame made his debut with a faultless rendering of Raunchy, resulting in his being selected as drummer for the Quarrymen by Eric Griffiths, the manager. There was, until a few years ago, Aerial Parade, a neat but failed shopping facility named after the famous Garston gas holder. The story is that in Shakespeare's The Tempest, the airy spirit said to Prothero, "I will divide and burn in many places," a good name for a gas distribution process, so the gas holder is called Ariel. The post office, which replaced one of a succession of post offices in St Mary's Road. This apparently led to fewer people going up the village and using the other shops, so adding to the decline of the village shopping centre. Woolworths came and went. The abandoned Transport and General Workers' Union office, which was of great importance to Gaston and a reminder of one of the great characters associated with Gaston. Jack Jones, of Transport and General Workers' Union fame, was educated at Banks Road Elementary School and became a dynamic leader in the trade union movement both nationally and locally. Now, at 89 years of age, he's already spent 20 years championing the needs of the elderly. The Trustee Savings Bank, which is now the only surviving bank serving Gaston with a bank in the area. Horrocks Avenue, named after Jeremiah Horrocks, clergyman and astronomer who successfully forecast the transit of Venus across the sun. Allerton Station and the former South Liverpool Football Club site, due for development. This whole area is due for extensive development with the planned transport interchange. Garston Station will be abandoned and reinstated alongside Allerton Station with a pedestrian connection with park and ride facilities, bus terminus, cycle parking and a reorganised road system. The entrance along here to the Highbank Drive estate and on the Holman Road corner the Church of England Primary School, which replaced the original Under the Bridge Church of England School, formerly a national school in Banks Road. The former B&Q store site before it moved to the retail shopping park. Beyond the trees, the St John Armand Roman Catholic Secondary School. Some may remember the prefab school buildings here along Horrocks Avenue, also used for the Noblet House Youth Club, named after one of the priests. An historic photograph of Speke Road looking towards Speke. To the left, at one time, a few cottages which were removed for road widening. Over the road, the matchworks in course of development. St Michael's Parish Church, a dramatic and fine reminder of the original village history of Garston, this being the third church on the site and a treasured continuation of the Christian presence in Gaston, and already referred to alongside, so appropriately, the magnificent gas holder, one of the largest ever built, symbolising, if you wish, the more recent industrial history of Gaston. Garston Way, the bypass, taking the increasingly intolerable traffic off St Mary's Road as a main feeder road to and from the city. The village, St Mary's Road, had become more and more dangerous with narrow pavements, and the traffic vibration was damaging the buildings. Unavoidably, along with supermarket competition and changed shopping habits, the reduced traffic has had a damaging effect on trade. The Alexandra Public House, one of the surviving Greenall pubs. Greenall's had a considerable interest in Garston, which was well supplied with hostelries for the delight and recreation of a close-knit community where the pub is an important part of community life. At the time of the building of Garston Way, at the request of Garston and District Community Council, following a proposal from the Garston and District History Society, the then County Council relocated this leading light into the centre of Garston from the docks. Pier Head has its Salvor mast. Why should Garston not have a symbol of its maritime history? Leading lights were mini lighthouses located in lined-up pairs on the docks to aid mariners in the fog or darkness. By lining up two lights, they could with careful navigation sail safely to the dock entrances. More recently, this light was relocated again as a part of the redesign of the whole area and the establishment of the meeting and performance piazza and other changes. The unique crane-like lamp standards were also designed to symbolise the maritime origins of Garston. Garston Swimming Baths and Recreation Centre, now replaced by the new swimming pools at the Sports Centre in Long Lane. The attached building was the wash house, an important provision in common with many in the city before the days of household washing machines and laundrettes. The baths are, of course, associated with another famous Garston name. Austin Rawlinson was the swimming champion and promoter of swimming and the swimming club. He was a member of the British swimming team at the Olympic Games in Paris in 1924. He was the only English swimmer to reach the final of the 100 yards backstroke and came fifth, to be recorded in the Golden Roll of Honour of the Olympic Games. Austin also swam in Northern and Empire events, was president of various swimming and sports associations, and team manager for the 1960 Rome Olympic Games. Garston Community House, the new one-stop shop for Garston voluntary organisations provided by the Speke Garston Partnership and handed over to the community. The building stands on another historic Garston site. Until recently, next to the Transport and General Workers' Union office, was the row of shops including the famous Irwin's and, for a few years, the Bridge Chapel. But before all this, there was a vacant, rough, open space used for travelling fairs and called the Spy and Cop. Here was one of the last remaining thatched cottages of Garston and Mason's Forge. The photograph shows a lot of the changes of the 1920s and 1930s. The Spy and Cop, the railway bridges, St Michael's Church, Blackwell's metallurgical works, which produced very specialised ores and was of key importance during the Second World War, the baths and wash house, the refuse destructor, the site of the thatched cottage, the hospital, the Empire, Horrocks Avenue, the gasworks, St Mary's Road, and much more. The cottage remained until the mid-1920s. The structure in the front was for selling beverages, one of the last inhabitants being Paddy Flynn, who sold vegetables and was a well-known local character. So to the bridge, made famous and infamous by dividing Garston into two parts. It was once a convenient barrier for closing off under the bridge when there was an industrial dispute at the bobbin works. To the original stone bridge for the first lines to the docks was added a second iron bridge when the line through to Cressington and Liverpool was constructed, whilst the third bridge was built for the bypass. Recent resurfacing of the bridge walls has added to the improvements aimed at making the whole area more attractive. To the right, where the trees are, was the access to Church Road Station. A rare picture of the entrance to the station with the Mersey mission to seamen and railwaymen. There was also Dock Road Station, not far away. When the line at Cressington Station was taken round to the present Garston Station, a much improved route to Warrington was provided, and these two stations were no longer needed. St Mary's Road, Garston's first bypass. This provided a straight link with the other end of the rather winding Garston Old Road, and became the busy, bustling shopping centre we've already referred to, the village. It was a thoroughfare built with style, with many side roads having the nice rounded corner buildings, not always characteristic of shopping centres. The Citizen Advice Bureau, the first in Liverpool, later moving to James Street and then to Garston Community House. Portus and Rhodes, industrial and commercial electrical contractors, and the Mariners' Arms. Looking down towards where once the brook flowed, various shops, now derelict, and the Mona Castle long gone, and with the site under new development. Carberry Park's motor spares dealers, and once the Lancashire Constabulary Station. The Queen's Pub has the rounded corner feature just mentioned, as had the Mona Castle on the other side. The Mona, having been empty for several years, was offered to the Community Council and History Society for £1 a year rent as a heritage centre and community facility. The snag? Yes, it had broken its back and was held together with tie bars. Why? Because the front had been built in the dried-up bed of the brook, where it turned to flow down to the Mersey, and the rear part had been built on the solid rock outcrop, which, somewhat reduced, carries the Empire Theatre and where once was Garston Hall. Nearing completion, here is the new complex of offices, flats and houses. How different from the appearance of this corner some years ago. We go under the bridge and along Church Road. The road ahead is King Street, leading to the Tannery, and to Blackburn Street, named after the Blackburn family, and to the industrial estates. Also ahead, Dale Street, with formerly an entrance to the docks, leads down to the site of the former distillery and a fine view of the Stourbridge dock. Few docks in the country have such a fine viewing platform. Round to the left, Banks Road is the main road to the still densely built-up area of mainly terrace housing occupied in the past by hundreds of families, a high proportion of whom worked at the many factories. This truly is the under-the-bridge community. Railway Street and the tree-covered end hides the location of Adam's Dyke and the later embankment formed by the filling in of the Brook Valley to raise the level of the land for the railway siding and storage facilities. Where now stand these derelict houses and shops was once the powerful Brook and Mill Dam which powered Adam's Mill. The dingle along here was the delightful leafy country walk beside the rushing brook flowing down to sandy beaches on the River Mersey. The houses and shops are due for demolition and landscaping, perhaps slightly restoring, or at least reminding us of the country appearance of long ago. Amongst the various shopping roads of Garston, Church Road here was the scene of a lively range of shops as people passed to and from the village in the course of their work, shopping and leisure. We pass the old wall of St Michael's Church, and just opposite is the vacant land where stood the Jubilee Institute, belonging to the church and the place for a large number of church and social community events. The sad sight of Daly's pub, once the Blackburn Arms, and previous to that, the Cock and Trumpet. Behind and alongside the pub, this derelict site is the most historic site of Garston. Beneath the warehouse, probably 20 feet down, are the remains of the Adam de Gerston mill. In the 1920s, a university research team unearthed a sandstone wall bearing a 12th century date. The remains are now buried beyond any real chance of ever being seen again. Here was a centre of the life of the original village, the mill close alongside the ancient church. St Michael's Church of England Church, at the centre of village life for centuries, and more than a treasured Garston landmark, has a history going back centuries. There was a first church long before the Anglican Church existed, before the Reformation, and it was dedicated to St Winifred way back in 1235, possibly a chapel to a church of St Michael. From excavations, it seems that the first church was larger and more impressive even than the present one. But with the Reformation, which began as a political movement, but became a religious and doctrinal one, the church was confiscated by the Crown, desecrated, and left to fall into decay. In 1605, this deterioration was halted by Edward Norris of Speke Hall, and the church was repaired. Unfortunately, by 1650, it was in ruins again. However, Edward Norris, whose grave is in the churchyard, reconstructed it on the same site as the first church, dated 1726, and it became the parish church of Gaston. It was finally demolished in 1888. The second church, dedicated in 1716, was a small affair adjacent to the original site, and with an organ donated by W.M. Rushworth of Liverpool. The church had a small bell turret, leading to the rhyme, "A stone church with a wooden steeple, an Irish church and English people." However, the second church was too small, and the present church was built and was dedicated in 1877 by the Bishop of Chester. Many changes have taken place over the years with the dedication and support of the people of Garston. Notably, in 1984, the bells were renovated and reinstalled in the repaired tower. They still ring out, some 125 years since installation, to challenge people to worship. In 2002, a meeting room with social facilities was sympathetically blended into the back part of the church, compensating to a point for the loss of the Jubilee Institute as a church hall. The graveyard contains an interesting remain, which may have been a part of a cross or a grave, and which consists of a hollow stone-carved bowl, which is thought to have been for holding vinegar for use when there was plague. Coins and fingers could be sterilized on market occasions. So we move on. The tannery, the Garston Leather Company as it's now called. This is not far from the mill where Adam also dealt with leather from the local farm cows. Apart from the docks, the tannery is now the only surviving original industry. The corner office was once the Vulcan pub on Vulcan Street. Vulcan, the Roman god of fire, for here was once a Liverpool iron and steel works with its blazing furnaces. At its peak development, and around 1911, the works dealt with 10,000 hides a week, manufacturing shoe leather, leather for furnishings, car upholstery, trunks and bags, and later sausage skins. Hides were obtained from all over England and Scotland, USA, Brazil, Africa, Australia and New Zealand. The tannery extended into Blackburn Street. Only one of the huge drying sheds remains, unused, modern processing not requiring the elaborate hanging and drying out once necessary. Along with several establishments in Gaston, the works had its own water supply from a well. The final demolition of the chimney for the Lancashire boilers was carried out by none other than Fred Dibner. We'd rather still see it up, but thanks all the same, Fred. The drums are still a part of the process. Another water tank belonging to the ironworks. And as we look along Blackburn Street, we're reminded of the locations of many famous Garston industries. the remains of many of the buildings being now home to small businesses, still providing jobs for Garston people, though by no means as many as were provided in their thousands by the former industries. On the left was the largest bobbin and shuttle works in the world, Wilson's Bobbin Works, now the Gaston Industrial Estate. Wilson Brothers Limited. Bobbins and shuttles actually began near Todmorden in Lancashire in 1823. By 1892, after outgrowing several sites, the factory not only filled the valley in which it had developed, it needed direct access to port facilities for timber imports and export of bobbins and shuttles to many countries of the world, as well as to this country. The answer? Garston. Here were the land, the docks, the railways and the workforce. A fleet of the works' own schooners brought hundreds of tons of rare woods, necessary for very specialised bobbins and shuttles, from many parts of the world, and the factory produced 1 million bobbins a week. The Garston Works was called the Cornholm Works, as a reminder of its Todmorden origins, and of course many workers migrated to Garston to join the Welsh and other worker immigrants. To the right, as we look down present-day Blackburn Street, the now Weaver Estate was the site of the Francis Morton Iron Works, the Copper Works, Bottle Works, Sugar Works, Distillery, Dock and Graving Dock. In 1880, Francis Morton and Co. built the Hamilton Iron Works, named after Colonel Hamilton of Windsor, who'd built a dock and seawall, still in evidence, and produced steel lifeboats. Morton's produced prefabricated stations, schools, barracks, churches, warehouses, sports pavilions, bridges, piers, garden railings, and many other items which were exported all over the British Empire. In Liverpool, Morton's provided the heavy ironwork for the Liverpool Overhead Railway. Evidence of this can still be seen today at Wapping, where the only remaining supports of the overhead railway are to be seen embedded in the wall of the warehouse, with the famous name visible at the bottom of the ironwork. Morton's also produced the ironwork for the Everton football ground stands, the Stanley Abattoir and Clarence Dock Power Station, to name but a few Garston achievements. In Garston, Morton's provided ironwork for number 1 hangar at the airport, the bridge in Speke Road over the railway, and the bridge over the road at Allerton Station, which were made from the largest girders ever produced in this country up to that time. Garston Bottle Work produced bottles for wines, beer, whisky, milk, jams, pickles, medicines, materials, detergents and many others. After purchase by Rockware Glass Limited, manufacture declined and the buildings were sold in 1976. The shipbuilding firm of Graysons took over the graving dock developed by Peter Baker, one-time mayor of Liverpool. Baker built and operated a privateer called the Mentor, which captured the French East Indiaman, the Carnatic, which happened to have £135,000 of diamonds and other valuables on board, making Peter Baker a very wealthy man, well able to build and live in Carnatic Hall. The road ahead leads to the Mersey Way and the notorious Breakers' Yard, the Iron Shore, where children, no doubt in some danger, could play on ships being dismantled. More pleasantly, the Mersey Way leads out to Hale, and the delightful river coastline of outstanding natural interest. Hopefully the pollution and eyesore of the Breakers' Yard will be removed. There are visionary plans to link the Mersey Way through Garston and Liverpool to the Pennine Way, and linking across the Hull and Europe for walkers and cyclists. Garston on the tourist map. Garston Docks. The salt docks were very limited, and only for the specific purpose of handling the Mersey flats, the sailing barges with the salt. The building of the first wet dock with double lock gates was essential for movement in handling and quicker turnaround. It was soon overcrowded. The centre dock, now known as the Old Dock, was built by the St Helens Canal and Railway Company as an outlet for coal from the Lancashire mines to be shipped to Ireland, and to supply coal for the growing number of steamships replacing the sailing ships. Ships were getting larger. The river upstream was more and more silted up with treacherous sandbanks, so Garston's open coastland, with convenient cliffs, was chosen for an entirely new development which to this day can take ships of a substantial size. This neat accumulator tower was for a huge piston device to provide water pressure for the dock gates, sliding bridges and capstans for the working of the docks, one remaining neat monument to the past. The stone constructions are the remains of the coal-tipping machinery which received the coal wagons, lowered them and tipped the coal into the ship. Garston workers, the trimmers, had to move about the hold amidst the showering coal and spread it out evenly to balance the ship for sailing. A tough job, especially with a candle attached to their hats to give light in the dark corners. In 1868, with dock ownership now LNWR, the North Dock was built to cope with very rapidly expanding demand. This was also equipped with coal-tipping apparatus, as was the Stalbridge Dock, named after Lord Stalbridge, chair of the LNWR Dock Company. These tippers in the Stalbridge Dock were more elaborate and were transferred here from Penarth in North Wales. In 1921, as a result of regrouping, the LMS took on ownership, and Gaston became worthy of an advertising postcard. So with the excellent dock and handling facilities, more and more imports and exports, and more factories, Gaston had become a substantial town, from 1902 actually a suburb of the big city. It is fortunate that we actually have in existence a diesel and sail-powered schooner which was one of the last commercial sailing ships to trade in and out of Gaston. In the Maritime Museum we have the De Wadden, built in Holland in 1917, seen here loading pit props, and will probably return with a load of coal to Ireland. Here she's sailing along to the Maritime Museum. The Stalbridge Dock, the last of the docks to be established in 1909, was soon to attract Fife's famous banana trade, and a mechanised conveyor system was built with refrigeration facilities. There were refrigerated trains and a fleet of ships specially adapted for carrying fruit. Gaston supplied over 50% of British banana imports until in the 60s the trade moved to Southampton. In Liverpool, Alfred Jones of hospital fame sent barrow boys round the streets of Liverpool giving away this strange fruit which people were suspicious of. The banana was said to be the fruit of the classes and not of the masses. Garston Dock survives today with trade in timber, steel, scrap metal, chemicals and fertilizers. So from that first settlement of people centuries ago around the powerful brook flowing into the great River Mersey, there developed docks and factories, and with these the people, the houses, and all the other things which make up a living community. Today we can still see something of all that went before. The dolly, or dolphin, out in the river carried a light to indicate the dock entrance, and this, along with the leading lights, helped skippers to sail into the docks in safety. The now unused jetty has a good Liverpool story worth telling. Some skippers, as they passed Pier Head, used to drop a man off, who would jump on a tram to Garston, dash down Dock Road, and sign the ship in as, say, number 3, so that when the boat reached the quay at the jetty, they could sail past all the ships with higher numbers and get a quicker turnaround. The modern control tower now deals with the much reduced flow of ships, and hopefully will do so for many years to come, as Garston docks remain in use to remind us of an extremely important past. Banks Road, the historic road from farming days and leading to all the roads in the beyond the bridge residential area and through to the industrial sites. Winfield Road Estate was a later addition to the original housing and is close by the now derelict open land of the old Northern Airfield. Bankfield House, originally the home of the manager of the copperworks, was taken over by the parish church and used as their vicarage, and later as a multi-activity community and youth centre. Activities have been organised here for several decades for all ages: youth clubs, drama, senior citizens clubs and lunch clubs, holidays to the continent, camping, you name it, and it probably took place at Bankfield. Bankfield House was the organising base for many wider community activities, notably the nationally supported Up the Shore race, and later the Devil's Gallop, There were also cricket and golf events to cater for the wide interests of Garston people. The village hall was opened by the Queen and the Duke of Edinburgh in July 1999.
Your Majesty, Your Highness, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the Garston Urban Village Hall Board and the community of Under the Bridge, larger communities of Speak and Garston, I warmly thank you for being present on this happy occasion. Your Majesty, on behalf of all present, it would be a great honour for us if you would unveil a commemorative plaque and together with His Royal Highness sign the Visitors' Book.
I think it's 3rd July. 1 year? 50 weeks. Finished on Saturday. What's the next one? Next on the agenda, sir.
It's a complex of indoor and outdoor sporting and social facilities managed by the community. It also includes facilities long missing from what was an increasingly deprived area, since the new complex includes doctor's surgery, cafe, pharmacy, the Hilda Mason Day Nursery, relocated from an old prefabricated hut, and a National Children's Home Children's Centre. Beyond the trees, the former Bryant and May Match Factory sports field, now the Hamilton Park housing estate. The Match Factory premises have been converted into a commercial village, bringing much-needed employment, and the former administration building is the headquarters for development agencies working in the area. The new Banks Road Primary School replaced the substantial Victorian brick and terracotta building, much loved by the local people. The school was a community, family school, in an area where practically everyone knows each other. This is, and always has been, a closely knit community, where in some cases several generations of Garstonians followed on through the school and had an excellent start to their education. Doubtless this family spirit will continue and be built on in the new building. Further along, the Methodist Church with a chapel in an adapted part of the church hall to compensate for the loss of the original church building on the site where now is this new accommodation. Further along, opposite the gasworks, was where the original Church of England school was situated. There's thought to have been a Garston school in a cottage around 1715 in the Before the Bridge area in Kettle Nook. This was known first as Garston Free School and later as the National School. In 1859, the National School moved to School Street off Banks Road. This became the Church of England School, which then had another move to Holman Road off Horrocks Avenue in 1964. The most remembered headmaster of the school, when it was in School Lane, was Mr. Robert Wright, from 1878 to 1913. The opening ceremony for the Holman Road School was performed by the Lord Bishop of London, the Right Reverend, Right Honourable Robert Wright Stopford, who was a nephew of the above Mr. Robert Wright. The bishop had attended his uncle's school, the school in the early 1900s, when as an 8-year-old he lived in Clarendon Road. Holy Trinity Roman Catholic Church and its primary school, also with a local, warm, friendly community atmosphere. Just visible near the tree is the Cinder Path, which is a footpath going right across to Speke Road alongside the gasworks and coming out near to the former Bryant and May Lodge Gate. this cinder path was, and still is, an important pedestrian route for people going to and from schools, shops, and their places of work. This was also the location of the Tushingham brickworks. The Tushingham family were very well known in Garston, being the proprietors of a number of pubs and shops in the area. John Tushingham, father of Rita, was born in Garston Hall. Garston Gasworks, now only distributing North Sea gas pumped under the Mersey, but once producing water gas and coal gas for the south of the city. The gas holder Ariel, one of the largest ever, with a capacity of 4 million cubic feet. This huge gas tank was the scene during the Second World War of a dramatic and heroic story of Garston being saved from horrendous destruction. On November the 28th, 1940, a parachute magnetic landmine fell through the metal roof of the gas holder, failed to explode, and hung by its ropes to ironwork inside. A number of the workers did what they could to ensure the safety of the works and the workers until the bomb disposal unit arrived. Naval Commander Lieutenant H.R. Newgas, remarkable coincidence in the name, went time and time again into the muddy water of the holder with an oxygen mask and defused the mine. Several thousand evacuated Garston people eventually returned to their homes. The trains began to run again, and life went back to normal. The heroic deed of Lieutenant Newgas and the local men involved is commemorated by a plaque in the parish church, the result of the History Society arranging with British Gas and the parish church for a special service, which was attended by members of the Newgas family and the other families. Window Lane, named after the old farm fields which were called windows because either they had a window view over the river and to the Wirral, or more likely perhaps, they were very windy fields. The other end of the village takes us to the Garston Hotel, a handsome building with an interesting history. It had a lookout turret on the roof from which the movement of ships on the river could be watched and messages sent to confirm arrivals and departures. The view across to Dock Road reminds us of the many changes. Where now is the Garston Way was once the railway line, originally the Cheshire Line's company end-on junction with the LNWR. There were crossing gates here. To the left was Garston Dock Road Station, and to the right a signal and gate operating box. Fortunately, when the former county council built the bypass, a considerable length of the original sandstone railway wall was retained and restored. A short way along behind the now lost platform were the Merseyview cottages. One elderly resident told of the cows in trucks in a siding mooing over the wall, to the delight of children in the cottages and no doubt to the annoyance of the adults. Speeding traffic now replaces speeding or shunting trains passing the gasworks and on to Speke Road and out of Liverpool. In the other direction, the dual carriageway leads to Aigburth and the big city. Dock Road reminds us of the once frantically busy thoroughfare down to the docks, workers in the various trades, ship's outfitters and the like, and sailors of many nationalities staying in the village. Beyond the trees was once the complex of railway lines and storage warehouses. The docks as a whole had 93 miles of rail track, which at its peak was the vital supply and distribution network for many industries and docks. Also, of course, the livelihood of hundreds of Garston families. The Northern Airfield, stretching from Speke Road and Speke Hall Road to the trees of Speke Hall and the Mersey riverbank. Planes no longer fly here, and the whole operation has transferred to Speke. A few years ago, the new terminal building finalised the transfer of the airport, leaving the Northern Airfield vacant for development. Speke Hall, one of the treasures of Liverpool, and much valued by the people of Garston, because owners of the hall once owned Garston itself. The Norris and the Watts families were great benefactors of Garston, its church, and its people. In 1770, Speke Hall and the manor of Garston were held by the Norris family. Mary Norris, a niece of Edward Norris, was heir of the manor. Mary married one Sidney Beauclerk, and their son Topham married Lady Diane Spencer, daughter of the Duke of Marlborough. Topham was somewhat irresponsible, and eventually the estate was sold off in parcels of land, and from then on the ownership of Garston was a complicated one of successive owners of various large and small holdings. The Watt family at Speke Hall were patrons of the parish church. Miss Adelaide Watt helped to finance the building of the boundary wall of the church and the Lich Gate using stone from the second church. Members of the Watt family and the Norris family are commemorated in the church. The aerodrome actually started over the fields nearer to the river. Here we look over to the now derelict land soon to be developed. The outstanding renovated airport terminal building, now an unusual, attractive Marriott hotel. Here, where the planes took off for distant places, new industries now flourish. It's hard to imagine the airport scene of not so many years ago. It was just here that the story of Liverpool Airport really began. Despite efforts to save the oldest hangar in the country, the original buildings were razed to the ground just a few years ago. Rubble and overgrowth marks another Garston historic place. In 1928, Liverpool Corporation, realising the growing importance of air transport, bought this parcel of land between Garston, Banks Lane and Speke Hall Estate. The land comprised of 3 farms: Chapel House Farm, Mount Pleasant Farm and Sutton Farm. Chapel House Farm was used to start the airport off, and the other 2 were demolished. How important had these farms been to supply the Garston shops and people with their eggs, milk, meat, vegetables and other commodities before the days of the supermarket. In 1932, Chapel House Farm was converted into a control tower, and the nearby farm buildings were roofed over to form the first hangar. The visible walls are actually the inside walls of the nearly demolished farm buildings. The blocked-in windows and doors would have originally looked out onto the farmyard, which was roofed over. A spectacular flying display in 1933 marked the opening, and the airport was quickly used for flights to the Isle of Man, Croydon, Blackpool, Scotland, Ireland and Wales. The splendid terminal building, control tower and hangar number 1 were built between 1937 and 1939, and hangar number 2 as the war broke out. A bomber service was allocated, and the RAF had a hutted encampment close to Banks Lane. Moving up from Church Road and turning off Woolton Road, we follow the original roads through to Garston Old Road and the way to Liverpool before the building of St Mary's Road. All around here were the cottages of the farming village which grew up around the bend in the Garston Brook. The cottages of the salt works and fishing people were further down towards the Mersey. Garston was a village in 2 parts. Some of the oldest village homes, some with original sandstone walls, and one, until a few years ago, with a well in the garden. Hidden behind the trees, one of the Welsh chapels which served the Welsh immigrants who came to Garston with the copperworks. The white building, Laburnum Terrace, is a set of terrace houses. It's said that at one time the Coast Guards lived there. The former school and technical school, annexed to Toxteth Technical College, stands on the site of the Joseph Rawlinson & Sons Limited sawmill, which was destroyed by fire in 1898. The firm moved to temporary premises in Moss Street, later to move to the site and premises of the Garston Iron and Steel Works, purchased from the Tanning Company in King Street. The Moss Street site became the location of Mapleton's famous health food factory. The impressive terracotta date stone reminds us of the Technical College date of 1909, and the building provided gymnasium, an art room, hence the impressive windows. The school achieved high levels of exam successes for its students. The very well-constructed building has had several other uses over the years, and now accommodates education welfare and pupil referral unit. Wellington Street, with further down the Wellington pub. James Wood, a one-time proprietor, was an agent for Greenall's. James Street and Wood Street were named after him. Another of Garston's very significant buildings, the reading and lecture room. Before the days of public libraries, many towns and cities had reading rooms for the benefit of people who couldn't afford newspapers and books, and as an educational centre. Hugh Gaskell Sutton, Esquire, a generous benefactor of people less privileged than himself, provided money and set up a system of £1 shares to build the reading room for the working men of Garston. The reading room was opened in 1861. As the actual reading room function became less important, the building was put to a wide range of uses. It was used over the years for the inquiry into Gaston becoming a part of Liverpool, for silent movies, for very dramatically the preliminary hearing for the controversial and famous trial of Mrs. Florence Maybrick of Grassendale, who was accused of murdering, by poisoning, her husband James Maybrick, a prominent Liverpool businessman. At the reading room, the evidence for the arsenic was produced and investigated. Mrs. Maybrick was convicted of the offence, sent to prison. After 14 years, she was released and ended her days in obscurity in America. For the Presbyterian and Congregational churches' services before they built the churches. For parish church Bible classes, billiards and table tennis, and football team planning. For boys' club and boxing club. The building became derelict and deteriorated and well used by the pigeons. Since all trustees had died, nobody owned it. On the initiative of the Community Council, the reading room was taken over and renovations began as it was developed for all sorts of community purposes. It's now owned by the Community Council on behalf of the people of Garston. Beyond the reading room, a row of cottages at a slight angle to the road, probably because of road realignment, but along with the other buildings, giving a flavour of the atmosphere of the village of bygone days. These new houses replaced the Mapleton factory. Hugh Mapleton was very interested in health and vegetarian foods and went into the grocery business. He experimented with nut foods. In 1907 he moved from Manchester to Garston. Notably, the firm produced the honey grain breakfast foods. Products went to China, Dutch East Indies, Australia, New Zealand, South and West Africa. In 1931, the factory was burnt down and had to be rebuilt. As many as 250 people were employed, with up to 400 at Christmas time, mostly women. The old road turned to the right across what is now the school playground for the St Francis of Assisi Catholic Primary School. The building in the centre is a part of St Francis School and church premises, and until recently was a social club as well as a school hall. Built in 1837, it was the first Methodist chapel in the area. Previously, preaching services and Sunday schools were held variously in a room in the Salt Works, in a joiner's shop in Hughes Street, and in a barn in Clark's Farm in Window Lane. There's an interesting story about the building of this chapel. It was donated by George Heald, a wealthy cotton merchant, and built in the grounds of his home, Garston Lodge, which is commemorated in the name Heald Street. It was built at the request of his dying 8-year-old son, who'd been impressed by the Methodist preachers. Young Joseph asked his dad to build him a house of God in the garden. Out of love for his son, George set about fulfilling this wish. Mary, his 5-year-old daughter, who died before it was finished, looked forward with anticipation to worshipping in My Brother's Chapel. Here, on the corner of Granville Road, was Garston's first hospital, an accident hospital urgently needed, not least because of the docks and factories where accidents were prevalent. Injured men were placed on a stretcher and lifted onto a trolley complete with a rain hood, and they were then rushed up to the hospital by their pals in double-quick time for help. Smashed legs, arms and heads were dealt with, but the first patient was a Spanish seaman with cuts from a bottle. The hospital had 6 beds and a matron who worked 7 days a week and even had to ask permission to be allowed to go to church. Garston was later described as a health risk to Liverpool because of diseases being brought in by sailors from all over the world and because of poor sewage and other health measures. Despite this, Gaston at this time had the following comment made by the medical officer of health for the local government board, Sir Henry Littlejohn, who said, "I have rarely seen a nicer resort than Gaston, and if properly managed, it will become an overflow of Liverpool. Gaston has the advantage of sea air." The Wesleyan Methodist Church, which moved up from the Heald Chapel, was built here in 1872 and began to provide for the people who arrived in carriages from Cressington Park, as well as the people from further towards the village. There was also a church day school until pupils moved to the Gilmore School around 1922. This busy five-ways junction gives a view down towards the centre of the village and Chapel Road. This corner had a cluster of shops, including the Idle Hour, and now has the good new housing. Opposite where these houses are was the site of the Victoria Church of England School, belonging to St Mary's Church and only demolished in 1990. St Francis of Assisi Church, and just before it the preserved base of the Garston Cross, which was lost for a time in a builder's yard and then placed here on the initiative of the late Canon Waring. The Baptist Church also established itself in Garston with this tabernacle. It's the only church in the area with a baptismal pool for adult baptisms. Back to the Garston Hall ancient site, where more recently was the Mona Castle and the Empire, Sidwell Street. And a glimpse of some of the oldest remaining granite block road surfacing. Garston Docks imported such material from North Wales. The now derelict Red Lion pub, probably the oldest in the area, and shown on a map of 1848. No doubt a coaching stop on the corner of the road out towards Liverpool and the road out to Woolton. Close by is the former Salvation Army citadel, now a printing works. The Salvation Army played an important role in helping people in poverty and family difficulty. The Alfred Jones Memorial Hospital came about as a result of very great concern about the conditions in Garston and lack of public services. Early in 1900, there were discussions about Garston becoming incorporated into Liverpool. Streets were in bad and unhealthy conditions, there was no refuse destructor, there was the lack of a local fire station, baths and wash house. In particular, no accident and emergency hospital. After various moves over a number of years to build a hospital, several doctors have become concerned, including Dr. Grimes, and as it happened, one of his patients, a Mr. James Wilson, local grocer, well-to-do and living in Cressington Park, offered £5,000 for maintenance costs of a hospital. £2,500 was collected locally. The corporation made a poor offer. However, Sir Alfred Jones, a Liverpool businessman and one of the founders of the Liverpool School of Tropical Medicine, took an interest. Having fallen ill and been visited by Dr. Grimes, he was so impressed by the doctor that he offered a further £10,000 for maintenance of the hospital. Plans began to move forward, and the Alfred Jones Memorial Hospital opened in 1916 with 35 beds. With the rapidly growing industries and consequently more and more accidents, as well as the general needs of the growing population, there was now more adequate provision. Woolton Road leads up to the cenotaph, where those who died in 2 world wars are commemorated. Garston was always well endowed with pubs. The Swan, affectionately known as the Duck, is still going strong, with, as have many Garston pubs, a tradition of supporting sporting events, children's parties and charities. Garston also attracted the provision of theatres, cinemas and entertainment of all kinds, with the Empire being the really big and luxurious place for Garstonians of all ages to go for variety, plays and films. The Empire Theatre opened in 1915 with 876 seats and a mixture of variety, silent films and old-time music hall. Talkies came later with Gold Diggers of Broadway. Stars who appeared were Tommy Handley, Billy Matchett and Gracie Fields. Gracie Fields' shows were sold out and she'd go out onto the balcony and sing to those outside who couldn't get a seat. In the 30s, children's Saturday morning shows were held, with, it said, a commissionaire who shouted to keep order and was much feared. Elsewhere, other local entertainment included lantern shows at the Baptist Tabernacle in Earp Street, the Snowdrop Cinema in Heald Street, superseded on that site by the Winter Gardens, the Lyceum on St Mary's Road, the Jubilee Institute, and the Theatre Royal at 65 St Mary's Road, where Shakespearean plays were performed. And here we see and
Garston Legionette showing round at the moment. We have St Mary's Stall and their Independence Day float, 4th of July. So Abe Lincoln on there, football. And of course no carnival is complete without the Garston Pandemonium Band.
School.
St Mary's School. And obviously you picked the topic because of the date.
Couldn't be more topical, could it?
How long has it taken you to do the float?
Well, the actual making of the stuff about 4 weeks. But this morning, from 8:30 this morning.
So you've been very busy, haven't you? Got all sorts. Do you want to run through some of the people? Millions of people out on Garston Park, going to enjoy all the fun of the fair.
This has been the story of Garston. It began with field, farm and forest. It began with a tributary of the River Mersey. It began with the Garston Brook, with small streams flowing from the hills of Woolton. The brook gathered force, flowed where now is Horrocks Avenue. Gathering tributaries, it flowed down to the bottom of the village. It joined the great Mersey River and became the place where people could settle, rear cattle, grow corn, fish, and build houses and mills. So here came a village. So here came a town. So came docks and factories and work. The people passed through times of war and trouble. The people had good times and happy families. Gaston became a part of the big city. Gaston grappled with change and decline over the years. Gaston in renewal holds on to the best of the old. Gaston looks to the future with new optimism. More changes are on the way. The spirit of the people will carry the community forward. Many more are the stories of past and present, to be told, no doubt, in new ways and through future books and films. Who knows what lies ahead?